Okay, so I will start by speaking a little bit about exporting data from Facebase, so basically how you can get data from Facebase. So there are basically two main ways of getting data out of Facebase. One is doing just individually downloading a file. Whenever you get to a page where you see a file that's typically a highlighted URL, you can click on that and the browser will prompt you to save the file to a location on your local machine. And in order to do that, you don't need to be logged in. Anyone that can access the data set that's public can download any files, but you have to do it one by one. The other way is doing a bulk export where you can download a large amount of data, or basically all the data within a data set at once. And there are two mechanisms of doing bulk export. One is downloading basically tabular data in CSV format that you can then look at it using Excel or another spreadsheet tool. And that's typically used when we want to download so the result of a query, or we call a record set. And it has all the information about that and some of the associated metadata, but doesn't bring you all the actual assets or all the actual files. So you download information about the data set, title, researchers, some of the main descriptions, but not the actual data. The other way is downloading data using what we call it a DB bag, which stands for a big data bag, which is sort of a standard for delivering or exporting data, which is basically, in a way, is a sophisticated zip file or archive file that has all the information regarding the data, the metadata, and everything needed in order to validate that the data you're downloading is exactly what it's supposed to be. So we'll go through a bit of a demonstration of doing that. But I want to mention that the DB bag export is basically like a two-step process. The first one is first you do the BD bag export, you save this archive file to your computer, and then you use one of our tools that we call the Deriva bag tool in order to actually bring all the actual files. Then in the tool is called materialize the bag. So basically the bag has all the information about the files and where to get them. And this tool goes and gets them for you and download it to your machine in a very robust way. So it's, it's kind of like a batch process that can work in the background. It can be restarted in case you get disconnected. It will automatically do the validation of the files to make sure that the files didn't get corrupted during transferring or anything like that. So it's a very robust way of downloading data, especially with some of these data sets that can have hundreds of very large amount of files. This gives you the confidence that all the data you're getting is exactly what you want. And we have all, I will show now a little bit how to do that, but we want to point out in our website, we have precise documentation of how to do all these steps. So let me now go to Facebase. And so first I wanted to show the individual file download. Like imagine we'll go to our main interface. Let's say we're looking for mouse data of 13.5. We find this. We say, okay, this is the data set that I'm looking for. Like Rob already showed, we can see all the actual data, and then I say, okay, I'm interested in this file. I want to download this file, or I want to download, this other file. I can just click on that file, and the browser will ask me where to save the file, and I can click OK, and I can download that file to my computer, and you're done. And you can do that for one by one fashion. The other way, the next way that we want to do, let's say we are interested in knowing, okay, what do we know that Facebase have in terms of mouse data for 13.5 with, I don't know, this certain anatomy that I'm interested in. Or maybe that's not a good choice, but let's say just, so now Facebase here is telling me this is all the data sets with these titles, these experiment types, these species, these stages, the PIs, when it was released. So all this information, you can just go and download all this information and a little bit more information than what you actually see in this screen. And you can export that in a CSV form into a CSV file that you can save to your machine and then open up in for example, Excel. Right, so I will do that, and that will save that file. I can open it up in Excel. And as you see, in order to do that, I don't need to be logged in. I have done all this without logging into the machine. But let's say that now we want to we find another data set that we are interested in. Let's say this one. And I want to say, okay, I will do some study with all this data. So I want to download all the information about this data set. This data set has images, it has 3D surface models, it has a set of experiment and biosamples, imaging data, the associated thumbnails, sometimes even it has mesh data, may even have, at the same time, some other data sets have a combination of imaging and sequencing data. So all these data say, okay, I want to export all that, and I will study that. So the way of doing and downloading all the data is by going into export and downloading this DB bag. But if I will try to do that, I will see that I get a message saying, okay, you need to be logged in. So in order to log in, you need to be logged in with your Facebase user account. So if the first thing you need to do, if you have never used the site and you're not registered with Facebase, you need to sign up for a Facebase account. And when you go in there, you have different ways. You have basically two main ways of signing up or getting a Facebase account. And you can do that with your organizational ID, let's say the ID from your university or your institute, or if you already have a Globus ID, you can sign up using your Globus account. So I will go back to Facebase now and return where I was. So I will go back to the data set that I was interested in downloading. I will log in. Let's say I'm already a member, already have my Facebase account. I typically use my Globus ID, but I can also use my university ID if I want. So now, once I logged in, I see that here you can see your profile, all the information about the groups that you have accounts with. And then now I can go to export, select the DB bag export, and save the file, that zip file, to my machine. So, in my browser, it typically downloads the file to my downloads folder. So I will move it to another location so that it's clear. So now I have downloaded this sort of initial, this DB bag, which is sort of like a sophisticated zip file. So that's the first step. but it's not, you see, it didn't take that long to download the file. So because it's basically just downloaded the information about the file, what we call the metadata, and where to go get the actual data. So in order now to extract, in order to what we call materialize and get the actual data, I will use one of our tools that we provide. And later in the second sections, I will explain how to download and install the tools in your machine, but now I already have them here. So I will start the dbBag application. I will navigate until the folder where I have that dbBag file that I just downloaded, which is this one. And then here, the tool gives me a number of options. One is extract, which just is useful in order to explore what's in the dbBag, but doesn't really bring you all the data. If you really want to download all the data plus all the information about the bag and the data set, you have to click the materialize button, and this downloads the whole data set. This data set is actually not particularly small, so it might take a few seconds to download, but it's basically bringing a large collection of images and meshes. Well, while we talk, maybe we can look at. So we see that it already expanded the zip file into a folder called with the same name as the same record identifier as the data set in Facebase. And it has, a manifest of, every file, the bag information, the metadata, where it also has all the information about basically the structure of the bag. And then in the data folder, there is a large collection, a collection of CSV file, which is basically the tabular data of the actual records and metadata associated with the data set. So in the data set CSV, we probably have the title, in tabular form, so you can use it, you can read it on Excel or something like that. You have the title, the description. Then in the experiment, we'll have, for each experiment, we'll have all the metadata and tags associated to the experiment, the anatomy terms, the phenotypes, the biosamples information, the experiment information, basically all the information on the data set. And then in the assets, okay, now it's finished, almost done downloading the bag. In the assets folder, you will have basically by asset type, basically thumbnail, protocol, mesh data, imaging data, you will have the actual files. And this is actually very nice because everything's very well organized, and it will always be organized sort of in a similar way. So if you start using files, data from Facebase, you get used to always end up with your data organized in a very well clear form. So you have all the TIFF files, and you know that these are for example, under imaging data, we have the actual source data. Under thumbnails, we're going to have a smaller preview of some of those files, mesh data, and so on. So I think that's what I wanted to talk about, the exporting data, mostly using the dbBag. So if you are having any questions so far about the exporting? data. Okay.